This is casually hardcore.
Place the game closed. Game news.
And casually hardcore.
Press start.
On June 23rd, 2016, Sonic the Hedgehog becomes 25 years old. We're going to look back over the history of Sonic and how he has changed the gaming landscape in those 25 years. But first, let's start at a time with a brief bit of history before Sonic was even an idea, let alone a gaming icon. In 1985, Nintendo released the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America, 2 years after it debuted in Japan. With it came Super Mario Bros, which helped to launch not only the NES, but the name Nintendo around the world. In the same year, Sega released the Master System in Japan, not their first console by a long shot, but the one most people will recognise. Sega knew they had to compete against Nintendo and launched Alex Kidd. On the face of it, it looked a lot like Mario, a 2D platform game with colourful graphics, but despite appearing in multiple games, Alex Kidd never captured the public's imagination like Mario. The Master System barely made a dent in Japan. Europe, it fared a lot better where the NES wasn't that popular, but in America, Nintendo dominated, leaving the Master System as little more than a footnote. Sega, ever the forward-thinking company, started working on their next console, the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis in America. Releasing in 1988 in Japan and 1989 in America, the Mega Drive visually left the NES in the past. Boasting 16-bit high-resolution graphics, stereo sound and arcade-quality games, the NES couldn't compete except in one area: the games. Nintendo had a stranglehold with quality games from Super Mario Bros. To The Legend of Zelda, as well as third parties developing all their games for the aging NES. Mario was synonymous with Nintendo and great games. Sega, on the other hand, didn't have anything like that. Alex Kidd came to the Mega Drive but was never a title that drove sales, and Sega could not afford to repeat the same mistakes it had with Alex Kidd. What Sega needed was their own mascot game character, a Mario killer. With that, a contest internally within Sega was formed for a new character and platform game to take on Mario and become the new Sega mascot. Multiple character ideas were thrown around, over 200 in fact, before only 4 were left. However, there was no hedgehog to be found in these ideas. In fact, Naoto Oshima had come up with the idea for a rabbit, and was tasked to work with a young programmer called Yuji Naka. Yuji Naka was a talented programmer at Sega, and at the time had an interest in fast cars and wanted to design a game based on speed. The rabbit character wasn't working out as planned. It required multiple buttons to do things, such as jump and attack, due to how it would animate. And a side note here, would actually go on to inspire a new platformer, Rice Star, years later. Whereas Yuji Naka wanted a simple control scheme, just like Mario where only one button was ever needed, the character needed to be able to do an attack just by jumping, which is where the idea for a ball came in. More research into characters was needed, looking at animals that could roll into balls for protection but still be dangerous. From this, an armadillo came about, but whilst it could protect itself, its body didn't have a way to attack, unlike a hedgehog with its spikes. From there, Sonic the Hedgehog was born. Why blue though? To match the colour of the Sega logo. These other character designs didn't go to waste though, and were reused in later Sonic games for different characters. From there, the game quickly came together, although slightly differently than what we eventually played. Sonic used to have fangs, be in a band, and have a girlfriend named Madonna. Upon sharing this information with Sega of America, they felt it was too Japanese, the story was too similar to Mario, and the band elements were unnecessary. While Yuji Naka didn't initially agree with any of this, he soon realised that their removal would help Sonic to become more successful. With those ideas thrown out, new ideas were required to give Sonic a purpose. Saving animals from Dr. Robotnik, also known as Dr. Eggman. Sonic's very first game appearance, however, isn't Sonic the Hedgehog. It's in fact in Radmobile, an arcade game where Sonic can be seen hanging from the rearview mirror. Sega of America went all out advertising Sonic and the Genesis in America, comparing the Genesis to the NES in America, and even giving away Sonic the Hedgehog, their best title ever released for free for all new Genesis owners. causing extreme conflict within Sega of Japan. It was a huge success though, giving Sega extra market share it desperately needed, especially as the launch of the Super Nintendo was nearing.
And it costs a lot less.
Sweet kid, that game
I'll
there.
take Sonic and Genesis.
I knew that.
Sonic the Hedgehog.
Sonic the Hedgehog came out on the 23rd of June 1991 in America and Europe. Featuring blast processing, it was blisteringly fast, super colourful, and was a huge step up on not just the NES, but even Mega Drive titles already released. Yuji Naka's hate of the slowness of Mario was what helped to inspire him to make Sonic fast and to great effect. This game is such a joy to play. You can either take it slowly, finding all the hidden extras such as TVs in the tops of palm trees, or go for all out speed. Certain sections of levels will force this speed to show off just how fast Sonic can go, even making the camera having trouble keeping up. This is where the clever blast processing comes in. Whilst a marketing gimmick, it is a little more than that. It basically freezes the animations of anything besides Sonic and the background to allow the game to go at such a fast pace by not having to redraw certain graphics. You're going so fast though that you never see this. Pretty clever. Sonic 1 is an interesting game as whilst speed is important, the slow areas really show off Sonic's platforming skills. Most people think Sonic is all about speed, but this game shows that Sonic is definitely not just about speed, but also precise platforming and exploration, with the huge levels often having multiple paths through them. The lower paths are generally slower and require more skill, whilst the upper paths are all about speed but do require some effort to get to. And I can't forget to mention the special stages. Looking amazing, these simple stages really showed off the graphics of the Mega Drive at the time. Just make sure you collect all the emeralds to get the special ending. Let's move on to Sonic 2 and move things up a gear, as there's a lot of games to cover in the Sonic franchise. Over 70 games in fact. Not all will be covered in this video, but we'll try and cover the important ones and a few honourable mentions. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 came out just over a year later to huge buzz on the back of the original Sonic, appearing on a random Tuesday in October. Although this Tuesday was to be named by Sega as Sonic Tuesday. Hype was through the roof. Sonic was joined by a new character, a fox named Tails Miles Prower. Get it? The game was made bigger, faster, and included a 2-player mode. Now your little brother can control Tails to help Sonic, or you can play split screen in race mode. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is the sequel we all deserved, and it doesn't put a foot wrong. The classic platforming is still there, but the speed has also been increased with a lot more chances of being able to go fast, as well as a brand new spin dash move so you could get Sonic going at full speed almost instantly. This game wasn't actually made by Sonic Team in Japan, but a new team in America headed up by Yuji Naka. This is very much a classic case of the blockbuster sequel. Everything is bigger and better. The game is full of surprises, as hinted at the end of Sonic 1, including Super Sonic. Collect all the Chaos Emeralds in the new special stages, and you too can become Super Sonic, who is not only invincible and yellow, but also goes even faster. Speaking of the special stage, these became so iconic they got reused for later games. Using 2D graphics to give a 3D effect, they're a lot of fun to play, are difficult, and let Sonic go fast. Before we move on to the next game, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 in my mind has the best end boss in a video game ever, with not only a metal Sonic, but a giant Dr. Robotnik. Sonic CD came out for the Mega CD add-on, also known as the Sega CD in America. Often considered the true Sonic 2, this game was made by Sonic Team in Japan and is a bit of an oddity. It features nicer graphics than Sonic 2, but visually looks a lot more like Sonic 1. Featuring a time travel storyline, the game consists of a past, current, and future version of each level where you have to go into the past to change the current and future levels. Because of this, the game focuses heavily on the platforming. At first, stages appear muddled and lacking flow, as any speed often ends with a dead stop and a wall. But by carefully working through the stages, you can travel back and forth to get the true ending. Being on CD, it also features a wonderful soundtrack and an FMV intro and outro. Again, a brand new special stage using Mo 7 graphics to create a Mario Kart style track, see Sonic running around and destroying enemies on it. Sadly, America got a bit of a bum deal with Sonic CD, as the fantastic soundtrack that Japan and Europe got was changed. It's not bad, it's just a little different. By this point, Sonic was everywhere. He had his own comics, one for America and one for the UK, 2 TV shows, plushies, McDonald's toys, and even appeared in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, where things didn't quite go to plan.
Wind blew Sonic the Hedgehog into another light pole. That guy sprung a leak and fell to the street, knocked over a lamppost. A child and a police officer were hit, slightly injured, but they're okay tonight.
Sonic fever was getting huge, and even your grandma had probably heard of him by this point. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 came out at the start of 1994, featuring a save system, even better graphics, and even bigger levels, a new character, Knuckles the Echidna, and again a 2-player mode. There was even a brand new special stage. Sonic 3 is most infamous for 2 things: Michael Jackson and rotating barrels. Michael Jackson is rumoured to have worked on the soundtrack to Sonic 3, and to cut a long story short, it appears he very well may have. Fans found similarities between his songs and those in the game. Musicians and producers who worked with Michael Jackson claim he worked on the game, but Sega of course remains tight-lipped. It's well known Michael Jackson was a huge fan of Sonic and appeared at the Sega offices multiple times. So what happened? There's 2 rumours. The first is Sega wanted to distance themselves after the allegations and court cases Michael Jackson faced in the mid-90s. The other is he wasn't happy with the sound quality being produced by the Mega Drive hardware and didn't want his music associated with that. But the barrels. There's a section in the middle of the game during Carnival Night Zone where you are stopped dead by a barrel blocking your path. Jumping on it makes it bounce, but not enough to get past. How do you get past it? Well, like many kids at the time, you didn't. That's all you ever saw Sonic 3, as it seemed like there was no way to get past this obstacle. But there is. And it's so easy you'll soon hear the minds blown of every 90s kid who got stuck here. Stand on the barrel and push up and down on the D-pad and it'll move. Nowhere is this mentioned in the manual or the game, and this is the only time you ever do it. An unintentional mistake by the developers, or a way to stop fans completing the game too quickly. Sonic 3 is an odd game in the series. It only features 6 zones while Sonic 2 featured nearly twice as many. So why does it even have a save state system? Well, there's a very good reason for that: Sonic and Knuckles. Sonic 3 was meant to be one game, but due to time constraints and memory size issues, the game was split into 2, with Sonic and Knuckles releasing just 6 months later as a very special cartridge. Sonic and Knuckles was a standalone game with its own adventure, but using the lock-on technology in the top of the cartridge, you can play Sonic 3 to join both games together and create one huge game spanning 13 zones, plus a bonus level where you become Super Sonic. You can play the game as Sonic, Sonic and Tails, or Knuckles, which gives you a slightly different story path through the game, as well as different routes through the levels. Knuckles isn't as fast as Sonic, but he can glide, punch through certain walls, and climb walls, allowing him to go to areas Sonic can't. Many people consider this to be the pinnacle of the 2D Sonic series, and they'd be right. Not only is it massive, filled with secrets, has a more detailed story, but it also takes Sonic and pushes him to the limits in terms of speed and platforming. Here's a well-known secret though: add Sonic 2 to the top of the cart, and you can now play as Knuckles in Sonic 2. Add Sonic 1 or any other game, and you will get a random 3D bonus stage unique to that game. By this point, Sonic was more well known around the world than Mario and even Michael Jackson. Sonic even appeared carved into the wall in the arcade game Daytona USA. It's funny to think that there was a time when most people knew who he was, whereas now it's much more likely someone hasn't heard of the blue blur. With the Sega Saturn, Sega's 32-bit console, on the horizon, how would Sega follow up on Sonic and Knuckles? Not very well, it has to be said. We first got Sonic 3D Blast, a port of a Mega Drive game made by Traveller's Tales, an isometric Sonic game which looks gorgeous on the Mega Drive but doesn't quite play like a Sonic game. You have to get Flickies, little birds known from an old Mega Drive game called Flicky's Island. The gameplay is quite slow, and whilst it's a fun game, it has nothing on Sonic and Knuckles. After that, Sonic fans had a long wait for the next Sonic game. Sega had intended to release a 3D Sonic game called Sonic Extreme, but due to internal conflicts at Sega, the game was put on indefinite hold. Instead, Sonic fans got Sonic 3D Blast on the Saturn, completed in only 7 weeks, and Sonic Jam, a compilation of the Mega Drive games, plus a 3D hub world featuring movies and info behind the Sonic games. A great collection, and the hub world is a lot of fun, but hardly the game to sell consoles. But to talk about this hub world for a moment, this was a prototype for a 3D Sonic game Sonic Team were working on. It looks great on the Saturn and offers a more classic, slower Sonic experience. Sonic R came out near the end of the Saturn's life, and is a racing adventure game. The main aim of the game is to race, but you can go off track to not only find shortcuts, but also collectibles. A lovely looking game made by Traveller's Tales of Sonic 3D Blast fame, that whilst pushing the Saturn to its limits, does get a mixed reception. Some people love the controls, others hate them. Some love the music, some hate it. Here's a taste to make up your own mind. By this point the Saturn was a huge failure. The Sony PlayStation reigned supreme, with the N64 doing fairly well too. The Saturn though, by 1998 Sega themselves had pretty much given up on it, along with most third parties. There needed to be a huge change. It'd been a long time since we'd had a proper platforming Sonic game. Too long. With the launch of the Dreamcast, Sega's new console near, they knew they had to have a Sonic game at launch or risk another disastrous Saturn-type console. Sega didn't have the funds left to do that. The Dreamcast was all or nothing. So what did they give us in 1998 with the launch of the Japanese Dreamcast? Sonic Adventure. Sonic's true 3D gaming debut, and boy what a debut. This game looked better than any game ever released thanks to the power of the Dreamcast, which was competing with the aging PlayStation and N64. Sonic Adventure is a platformer with light RPG elements. Featuring a huge open world, the game has a detailed story with tons of cutscenes listed throughout, giving the whole thing a Saturday morning cartoon vibe. Sonic was given a makeover with a new look, more attitude and fully voiced characters. Whilst cheesy and featuring Jake Lloyd of Star Wars fame, they were a lot of fun too. Sonic Team really pushed the boat out with Sonic Adventure, cramming in everything they possibly could. The game even supported DLC, pretty much a console first, allowing you to add Christmas themes to the game, as well as enter a speed contest in conjunction with Reebok. We can't forget to mention the VMU either. The Dreamcast memory card allows you to play a portable Tamagotchi-like mini-game featuring Chow that you can raise on the VMU, then import into the game to continue raising or competing mini-games. Sonic Adventure was a real showcase. It featured multiple set pieces which made people's jaws drop and helped to sell consoles. The game went on to be the best-selling Dreamcast game, and with good reason. The game is absolutely huge too, with 6 playable characters, all of which play differently, have their own levels and stories to complete, which are all intertwined. Not only did you get classic Sonic gameplay, but also snowboarding, shooting mini-games, and even a go-kart track. This was also the first time many gamers heard Dr. Robotnik referred to as Eggman. This game is a personal favourite of mine, and really does require its own video to talk about in more detail. Sonic was back on form. He even had a new cartoon show, his third and certainly not his last. With this success, Sonic Adventure 2 came out in 2001, dropping the RPG elements but keeping the story. You could play as either hero characters or dark characters through 2 stories which merged together for the ending. You now got the chance to play as Dr. Robotnik, but you were forced into what character you used based on the levels. Sonic's levels are brilliant and some of the best out there, with an amazing soundtrack by Crush 40. Sadly, the other characters let the game down a bit. Again, Sonic Team America handled the sequel, and you can tell just from the opening level they have a real love affair for where they were based, San Francisco. Sonic Adventure 2 even celebrated Sonic's 10th anniversary with a very special edition of the game, well worth picking up. By this time though, Sega had announced they would be discontinuing the Dreamcast and not making any new hardware. The Dreamcast had done well, but not well enough to keep the company afloat. Sega could have kept the Dreamcast going for another year or 2 longer before being crushed by the PlayStation 2 juggernaut, or they could become a third party and try to survive. Thankfully, they did the latter. Now Sonic would appear on the Nintendo GameCube, the home of Mario. If you'd said Sonic would be on a Nintendo machine a year earlier, you'd have been laughed at. Now all those playground fights of who was better, Sega or Nintendo, wouldn't be fought by different sides, they would join together. With this came ports of Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 to the GameCube, new 2D Game Boy Advance games which were made by a company called Dimps, and some very big ups and downs in the history of the Sega franchise. The Sonic Adventure games had brought Sonic back into the public eye, but not close to the 90s heydays. We had Sonic Heroes, which came out in 2003 on the GameCube, PlayStation 2 and Xbox, and allowed you to control 3 characters at the same time. Whilst a nice looking game that has its fans, its levels are often long and feel like blocks put together. Shadow the Hedgehog came out in 2005 and was designed due to the amount of children's letters Sega received asking them to make a game where Sonic shot things. A request which even Nintendo got, and is where the Flood idea came from for Super Mario Sunshine. Like Nintendo, Sega didn't want to put a gun in the hands of a beloved children's character, so instead of finding an alternative way of doing it, they instead gave the gun to Shadow, a character who came about in Sonic Adventure 2 and was deemed to be on the side of evil. So that makes it okay. The game is terrible though, and is the start of the downfall of the Sonic franchise. Almost exactly a year later, Sonic the Hedgehog was released, also known as Sonic 06 for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. This reboot, taking the name of the original game, was made on the brand new Hedgehog engine which was meant to revitalise Sonic. Sadly, it is filled with bugs and poor gameplay amongst other atrocities. Sega basically pushed the team too hard and gave them too unrealistic a deadline, with some staff saying they really needed an extra 6 to 12 months to make the game they really wanted to make. As Miyamoto once said, a delayed game is eventually good, but a rush game is forever bad. The Wii, however, got a totally different game in February 2007, Sonic and the Secret Rings. This was part of a storybook Sonic, taking classic stories and putting Sonic in them. Sonic controls a lot differently in this, as most of the controls are taken away from you. Sonic is constantly running on a single path with you only controlling left and right movement and jumping. It's actually a lot of fun, but does take some getting used to and does require you to level up Sonic so he can actually be Sonic. But compared to Sonic 06, this is amazing. It has a great multiplayer mode in it too, filled with Mario Party style games.
Let's go, Shara. Be careful, Sonic.
Later on in 2007, something extraordinary happened. Sonic and Mario appeared in their first video game together. Sonic and Mario at the Olympic Games. At times, these rivals would never have been imagined together, but here they were competing in the Olympics on a Nintendo console. If you enjoyed Wii Sports, you may also enjoy this. Taking a range of Olympic games and adding the Mario and Sonic universes together to create one interesting game. The controls are a little tough at first, featuring lots of waggle, but come on, it's Sonic and Mario in a video game together. Then in 2008, something even more amazing happened. Those playground fights of who was better, Sega or Nintendo? They were also about Sonic or Mario. Sonic was faster and better looking, but Mario had the better games. Who would win in a fight? Well, now you could get the answer to your question as Sonic joined the fight in Super Smash Bros. Brawl for the Wii. Finally, you and a friend could battle it out, punching, kicking, spin dashing and butt stomping on each other to see who was better, Mario or Sonic. In November 2008, Sonic Unleashed was released, featuring Sonic Adventure 2 style gameplay for one half and a platform beat 'em up for the other. It's a game that some people love and some hate. It looks great using the same Hedgehog engine as Sonic 06, only with the bugs worked out, and has some great Sonic levels. The Werehog stuff though is not really what Sonic is about, and takes what could have been a great Sonic game down to just an okay one. Be aware the Wii version is different to the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions, and is often considered the better one by simplifying bits of the game down and increasing the fun parts of the game. Then in 2009 we got Sonic and the Black Knight for the Wii, the second storybook game. Sadly, not as good as the first. But don't worry, the Wii got a better game in November 2010, Sonic Colors, which basically takes the good parts of Sonic Unleashed and makes it a whole game. Sonic is given new powers with the help of little creatures called Wisps. A beautiful looking game, filled with colour and fun levels. This is one Wii exclusive not to be missed. In November 2011 we got Sonic Generations. This was a game celebrating Sonic's 20th anniversary and not just with a little logo. This took Sonic's whole history and turned it into a game. Featuring some of the best Sonic graphics we've ever seen, this game takes classic original Sonic and using a simple time travel storyline pairs him up with modern Sonic, who came about in Sonic Adventure. By now there was two types of Sonic fans, those who loved the 2D Sonics and how those played, and those that loved modern Sonic and how those played. With no way to please both fans at once with a single game, Sonic Generations instead gives you both. Each level can be played in either classic Sonic or modern Sonic. Classic Sonic gets mostly 2D side-on versions of the levels, and modern Sonic gets mainly 3D action stages, which is a great way to get around this problem. Featuring at least one level from every mainline Sonic game, fans get to go back through the history of Sonic and relive everything from Green Hill Zone right up to Planet Wisp. This game is a beautiful love letter to Sonic fans, not only featuring classic levels with a new look, but is also filled with winks and nods to Sonic's 20-year journey. The soundtrack is absolutely huge, offering classic tunes and remixes that all fit in perfectly. This was a real return to form for Sonic and Sonic Team. It may have taken about 10 years, but Sonic fans got the Sonic game they deserved since Sonic Adventure. In 2013, Wii owners got Sonic Lost World, Sonic's take on Super Mario Galaxy. Whilst a visually beautiful game, this was more experimental than most had hoped for, with Sonic's speed and physics being totally different to any Sonic game ever seen. An interesting curio, and you may find some enjoyment out of it, but it didn't quite get things right. Do check out the Yoshi and Zelda DLC though for some crazy Sonic crossovers. Finally we land on one of the worst down notes in Sonic history, Sonic Boom. Made for the Wii U, this reboot of the Sonic franchise was a huge failure. Sonic and Friends got a totally new look which fans did not respond well to. The game though is a horribly buggy and boring mess. From you being able to break through the levels, to characters non-stop chatter, you'll be tearing your hair out in no time at all at how this game could be released in this state. Let's not give this game any more attention, but do check out the Sonic Boom cartoon, it's actually surprisingly good. That's a lot of Sonic history to talk about, but we're not done quite yet. There's a few honourable mentions we missed that we need to talk about first. Did you know that Sonic appeared not just on the Mega Drive, but also had ports to the Master System, Game Gear and PC? The PC oddly got ports of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, whilst the Master System and Game Gear got brand new games that were styled after the Mega Drive versions. In fact, the games are so different with new levels, gameplay mechanics and more, that they really are worth playing for a slightly more platformy take on Sonic. Just be careful of the Game Gear versions, they're identical to the Master System versions except for you see less of the screen which can cause some issues. The 32X, Sega's second ill-fated Mega Drive add-on, got Knuckles Chaotix. Originally known as Sonic Crackers before being retooled for the 32X, this sees you playing as Knuckles and one of his friends at the same time. Being joined together you have to use both characters at once to get around the levels and solve some light puzzles. Looks great, but the gimmick slightly ruins the flow of the game. Sonic also appeared on the DS in an original title called Sonic Rush, made by Dimps who made the Sonic Advance games for the Game Boy Advance. These went for all out speed. Gone was the slow platforming, this was all about going fast and blasting through everything. A fun game for speed freaks, although Dimps' level design lets it down, especially with their love of bottomless pits you can't see. The game did make great use of the dual screens though, where you move from one to the other over the course of the level. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 came out in 2010. The most awaited game in the Sonic franchise and one of the most disappointing. Yes, Dimps was back for a brand new next-gen adventure that followed on from Sonic 3 and Knuckles and gave us a classic 2D Sonic game so many of us had waited for. Well, that was the plan. Sadly, Dimps' level design and strange Sonic physics killed any joy that could be gained from this game. Remember the fun of Mario Party? Well, Sonic can do that and better, right? Not quite. Sonic Shuffle came out on the Dreamcast and gave us a fun little party game. Not quite as good as Mario Party, but fun for a few goes. Sega Sonic. Yes, that's the name of this arcade release in 1993, which is played using a trackball. Only ever coming out in arcades, this is designed to eat your money. So it can be a little bit difficult, but is a lot of fun to play and looks great too. Oh, and comes with cheesy Sonic music. What more could you want? Sonic the Fighters came out in 1996. Hot on the 3D fighting craze and is so much fun to play. Think of a kid-friendly Virtua Fighter with Sonic characters and you're there. Despite the polygonal graphics, the bright visuals and cartoon-like animations help make this a delight to not only watch but to play as well. This was even ported to the PS2, GameCube, Xbox and Xbox 360. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was not going to be ready in time, so Sega needed a Sonic title to quickly tide them over. Enter Sonic Spinball. Developed in just 6 months, you play as Sonic as a pinball, which makes more sense than it really should. Featuring a range of pinball tables that have goals you need to achieve to move on, this isn't quite your classic pinball game and is an interesting diversion from the classic Sonic games. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, basically Puyo Puyo with Sonic graphics, this classic puzzler will keep you busy and even features the characters from the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon. We can't not mention Sonic's mobile titles, Sonic Jump and Sonic Dash. Sonic Jump originally came out on mobile phones in 2005, 4 years before Doodle Jump even existed. The Sonic Jump you may be familiar with on your swanky iPhone or Android device was actually a remake of the original Sonic Jump. It's a lot of fun, as you may expect from these types of games. Sonic Dash is probably one of the most played Sonic titles in all his history, having been downloaded over 100 million times. This infinite runner takes what Sonic is known for, speed, and gives you an endless amount of it and tons of one more go appeal. Well worth a download. Finally, let's end on a high note. Sonic and Sega All-Star Racing transformed. Not Sonic's first time racing, having appeared in Sonic Drift on the Game Gear, this and its slightly earlier sequel Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing take the classic Mario Kart formula and stick Sonic front and centre. Where these games differ though is that the racing is more important than the items in this game, requiring a bit more skill to play. Both games are ever so slightly different, but we feel that Sonic Racing Transformed takes the groundwork laid by the original and just polishes it up into an amazing looking and playing game. Featuring water sections, flying sections and driving sections, you can see where the Transform name comes from. There's a huge amount of Sega history in here, from a Skies Arcadia track to classic music from a wide range of games. Oh, and don't forget you can also play as the Daytona USA car. That's it for our Sonic 25th anniversary video. We journeyed through the complete history in 30 minutes or so and didn't scratch the surface on everything Sonic has done. So happy birthday Sonic, here's to another 25 years filled with lots of highs and hopefully very few lows.